So good to see you. I know that the weather has deterred many people again, but for those of us who are here, bless you. Hand signals. Do we have some word of prayer? Let's pray. We thank you, O Lord, for the words of that song. Even though, yes, it's a nice song, nice melodies, much more than that. Thank you this afternoon that those words are true. In our lives, our agenda, the things that we are facing, little and small, matter to you. Thank you, O Lord, this afternoon that we are so much on your agenda that it's as if we are the only ones on your agenda. Such is your ability, your attention to detail in our lives. It's as if we are the only ones. And I thank you, O Lord, that you remind us that it's a trick of the evil one for us to think, oh, what I'm going through is too small for you to be concerned with, God, because you are the maker of the heavens and the earth. What I'm going through is too small to bother you with, but I thank you, O Lord, that indeed you want us to bring everything to you. I pray, O Lord, that this afternoon, through the songs, through the testimonies, through the message that Pastor Alan will be bringing, you will speak to us, that you will bless us, that you will be the one who shows us that you love us so much. Cause us to be the ones going from you far better than how we came in. Cause us to be the ones that will say, yes, it was good that we came to the house of the Lord. Now, Lord, we pray, for we ask it in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Let's sing our first song of the afternoon. 493 in the red. We're going to take an offering in the middle of this. If you come unprepared for that, then don't worry. Just leave the flag past you. I will trust in thee, Lord Jesus. Trust in only thee. Trust in thee for full salvation, great and free. This dance.
Salvation.
position in this meeting. And I will open the floor to a word of testimony. Maybe you've got something that you've gone through that you'd like to share that would bless other people.
In Jesus. We need to go through it. Because as strong as you two are, that's never going to be enough for me. And my son will tell me that. But when we were on holiday, and we were in the pool, and I had my back against the wall, thinking I was being brave, and I saw him coming towards me, and I burst into tears. And he said, Mum, as if. And before I was going to go through it all, I was just scared. And at home I was thinking, I'm going to make a fool of myself or something. And for a few days before, what had come into my mind was, think of baby Evelyn. She has to trust that she's going to be looked after. She's got no choice. This was in my head all the time. And then, on the evening, a bit before I went in, I was having dinner where you could see I was scared. When I got in the pool, I was scared. But then I had an overwhelming calm coming through me, and I knew how to act it. And then 2 days later, something came up on my post on Facebook, and it just blew me away. And it was from an unexpected source. It was nobody that comes from this church, nobody that knew that I'd been baptized with. And it said, it was just saying, it was a story of trusting a child has to trust. And it was Matthew 18. It didn't say exactly like this in there, but it just said, oh, I thought, yes. For surely I say to you, unless you are convicted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's what I would hope. And it's just thought, that wasn't me thinking about before I was baptized. That was the Lord speaking to me and saying, trust me, my child. My heavenly Father. And I did. Thank you, Lord.
And if you haven't seen it on YouTube, it's there. It's great. There's some lovely outtakes at the end of it. Me and Alan going under the water and all that. No, it's great. Absolutely. Anyone else like to share? While you're thinking about it, just a few moments to say, I mentioned a bit of it this morning. I had a meeting with someone that I regard as my boss, Nigel James. And that was, I lost track of days. Thursday. And through that, it's amazing how God works. The way that I needed to work for me to ensure that it's not me, I often needed to come from more than one source. And Nigel came and said some stuff, and other people have come and said pretty much the same thing. And like Avia said on Facebook, that it was from a source that wouldn't have known what's going on. And it's meant that I'm going through a very exciting season of change. it's one of those, because normally when you're sharing a testimony, when you're sharing something from the front, you're sort of out the other end of it, and you can say, oh, I can see that God did this and God did that. I'm well and truly in the middle of it. I haven't got a clue what's coming, but I know it's God. And I also know that whatever happens, I will be safe, I will be loved, and I will be cherished because it's His plan. And you see, sometimes we just don't like being out of our control. Water is the best illustration of it, folks, because to those of you who swim, you'll realize when you think about it, how does this work? I'm on top of the water, and I'm moving across the water, and I'm not sinking. In truth, we are out of our control. There's no better place to be but in God's hands. So this is going to be an unfolding testimony. As the next bit comes, I will share it. Anyone else want to share before we hand over to Paul?
Yeah. Well, as you all know, I've finally become a grown-up and I've got a job.
Yay!
Oh, I've got to resign already.
No.
It's hard work. But in all seriousness, it's how good God is because it's really taken me out of my comfort zone. And some days I feel I'm quite a fraud being there because I'm teaching these children. I'm thinking, I don't even know what I'm telling you. So there's no hope. But God reminds me on my journey in the morning that He's a faithful God. But also the devil's quick enough to knock you really down as well. So it's opened up all different walls and everything this week. It's been a really hard week. But that's all I know is God is faithful. But I would ask you to pray because it looks as though I've got another infection and my wound is still not healing. And I'm just thinking, that's what I don't tell. That's what I tell myself anyway. But it's just one thing after the other. But like we said this morning, wherever the mountain is, God can move it. And I'm still every day on the way to work and declaring that nothing is too difficult for God. And I think as we go into this year, we've got to declare it and say it out loud and believe it.
It's interesting that it's that part of an old chorus that has really impacted Nikki. Our Lord God, thou hast made the heavens and the earth by thy great power. And it's interesting from the point of view that was the first chorus I ever heard an Arab playing. It wasn't at the front of a service. It was little bits and pieces in the youth meeting, and it was before I was saved. And who would have thought that this young girl who had come to our Sunday school, who had made a decision for Jesus, who would now be at the front leading worship on the keyboard. This is what God does. This is what God does. So wonderful. Is there anyone else who wants to share? And if not, I'm going to hand it straight over to Pastor Go. Over to you. Bless you.
So maybe just talk amongst yourself while do your thing. I was just thinking about what Jason said there in terms of who would have thought Anne Harrod, and yet that is the situation on the ground, put it like that. But even more interesting and more sobering is this thought: who would have thought that young man in that meeting who wasn't saved would be the pastor of this church? But that's true on the ground also. Let's just pray. Father, I thank you for this opportunity to share something of my heart, which I believe is your heart, with your people this morning, or this evening, I should say. Father, I thank you for the awesome privilege that you've given me. Father, I pray that the words I speak will be spirit and they will be life. And Lord, that they would find good soil in the soil of our hearts. Lord, that we would know that you've spoken to us personally as well as collectively. Father, thank you that you're always with us and for us. Lord, that you promise never to leave us nor forsake us. And Lord, that it's true. Lord, that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Father, into your hands I commit this time. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, guys. I want to share a message with you this evening that I've shared here before, once before. I shared it some 5 years ago, memory serves me right. And I absolutely believe it's a word in season. It's a word I'm going to bring to my own church 4 weeks from today. But I think it's the word for you this afternoon as a church. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the bad report. And hopefully I'll make sense of that as I go along. But if you have your Bibles, I'm going to read 4 scriptures from different places. You know, if you can't follow me, that's fine, just listen. You can always listen to it, you know, via the internet anyway. But I'm going to read 4 different portions of scripture to you. And then I'm going to explain those portions of scripture for you. Thank you. So the first scripture is from the book of Numbers, and it's from chapter 13, verse 30 to 32. And it says this: Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread amongst the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. The next scripture is from the book of Daniel. It's from Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. And it says this: Now when Daniel learned that the decree, i.e. a bad report, had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. Other translations say, as was his custom. Our third portion of scripture is from the book of Mark, from chapter 5, verses 35 to 36. While Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, with a bad report. They said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And our last portion of scripture is from the book of Matthew, from chapter 11. I'm going to read verses 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. When John heard in prison what Christ was doing, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report," there's that word again, "go back and report to John what you see and what you hear. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me." The first bad report that I want to talk to you about is the one that comes to a given individual before they've even set out to go and do something for God. I'm sure we've all been there, and if we haven't been there, we'll be there at some point. It's when you know that you've heard from God, and you begin to think about that process and what that might entail for you. and you prepare, if you like, emotionally and mentally and spiritually to launch off into the deep, because it's normally into the deep because it's an exercise of faith. And just as you get to the cusp of thinking about moving from between thinking about it and doing it, a bad report comes. And it comes and it robs you of your faith and confidence, and it causes you never to push off from the shore. So you live your life wondering what the possibilities may have been if you had only trusted God and launched off into the deep. You know, when Peter walked on the water, he was walking on the water, but it's important that we understand he was walking on the water because he was walking on an invitation from God. Jesus said one word, and the word was, "Come." And that's what Peter bought into. That's why he could walk on the water, because he was walking on an invitation from God. And I know and you know, God is a God of the invitation. He invites us to things. He invites us to mysteries. He invites us to opportunities. And those mysteries and those opportunities are intended to grow our faith. But sometimes the enemy or the world around you or the voice of the past or any other voice that may vie for your attention comes to you sometimes before you're about to set off and do something, and it undermines your confidence in God, and it undermines your confidence in yourself. And I can say I'm quite a confident person. I wasn't always a confident person, but I am a confident person. But my confidence isn't in me. My confidence is in me in Christ. But that kind of bad report is the kind of bad report that just wants you to give up before you've even started. And the enemy comes with that bad report because he understands a fundamental human truth, and it's this. It's easier to kill something in its infancy than when it's up and running. The last thing the enemy wants you to get is to build up a head of steam, to get some momentum. You know, he doesn't want you launching off into the deep, trusting God. You know, listen, faith isn't a blind leap. Some people think faith is a blind leap. It's not, it's a calculated step. And it's simple in terms really. It's, I've heard from God, He's asking me to do this. I'm going to say yes, come into agreement and try and do it. And can I just say on that front, we don't have to be perfect. We're all perfectly imperfect. God isn't looking for the perfect one. He's just looking for the pursuing one. For that person who will dare to be different. And you don't see that particular bad report more clearly demonstrated than you do in the book of Numbers in chapter 13. It's that chapter where God commands Moses to send out 12 people onto the land that they're about to take possession of. And so they're sent off out into the land with a criteria. They're told to go and review the land. Look at its fortifications. Look at its soil. Look at whether the people are great or weak or somewhere in the middle. They're told to go and scout out the land and then come back. And we're told that 12 of them went out and they did what they'd been told to do. And then they came back. And then 2 people, namely Joshua and Caleb, gave a different report to the report that the 10 had given. And I just want to correct a mistake that's easily made. When we talk about the 10 being a bad report, it was a bad report, granted. But some people think it was a dishonest report. It wasn't a dishonest report. It was a brutally honest report. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is they were right in their observations, but they were wrong in their conclusions. And that's important. That we remember we may not be right in our observations, or we may be right in our observations, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're right in our conclusions. Okay? So we know that these 10 talk. Those two who believed a different report could not be talked out of what they believed. They were like, let us go up and possess the land and do unto what God has told us to do unto the land and there. Let us go, we can do this, let's be bold, let's be confident. And yet we know that the people decided to cleave and connect and come into agreement with the bad report. And what happens is a whole generation falls away in the wilderness. And not one of those people who bought into that bad report step into the promised land. They all perish along the way. It's a story of wasted potential, of what could have been. But we know that Joshua and Caleb did see the promised land.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to die thinking about possessing something. I want to die knowing I have possessed something. I've always been a great starter, I've always been a poor finisher. Thankfully, God's been changing that over the last 8 years, but I've decided to come into agreement with what God says about me. I'm not prepared to buy into what my past says about me. If I was ruled by my past, I wouldn't be here with you today. I'm not ruled by my past, and sometimes my future seems uncertain. Sometimes I don't know my left hand from my right hand, but all I do know is I would rather run into my future with God than to crawl into my past. You know, we want everything explained, boxed off, put in terms that we understand, but that's not how faith works. When you get that bad report that comes to you before you even set off, can I just suggest that you do the right thing, and the right thing is you nip it in the bud immediately. Don't allow it to get up ahead of steam. It's easier to rein something in before it's up and running. It's hard to roll in a runaway train. They say a runaway horse always runs away with its jockey. Someone once said we should pay attention to the fence at the top of the hill and then we won't need the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. Daniel did that. Daniel's going about his business and suddenly there's an edict passed by the king. And the edict is, for a period of time, no one is to pray to anyone except Darius, the king. And the people who were under Darius and who were sitting in judgment of the Hebrew boys, including Daniel, they had a problem with this. They wanted to find a way in to undermine Daniel because they could find no fault in him. But we know that the king ushers this edict. And we know that as soon as Daniel hears it, we're told this, that he goes, I'll read it to you. Daniel 6 verse 10. He didn't react, Daniel, he responded. It says this, now when Daniel learned, i.e. heard that the decree, the bad report had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows were open towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before, as was his custom. I love that. As was his custom. I was talking to someone last week who's kind of got themselves into some trouble, and I was explaining that everything could be worked out if we just decided to be honest about where we were at and what God had to say about that particular situation, and more importantly that we could trust God for a change. But it was really interesting because listening to him after an hour, I just had to call time out and say, listen, I understand that you picked up some bad habits. Someone once said, bad habits are like a warm bed. Easy to get into, hard to get out of. And I was able to say, whatever his name was, listen, this is habitual. It's habit. And only habit overcomes habit. So be encouraged. If you've learned some bad habits, you have the potential to learn some good habits. So let's change your habits by doing something different. And if we do something different, we'll get a different outcome, a different result. Isaiah 55 verse 16 and 17. As for me, I call on God, and the Lord saves me, evening, morning and noon. Just like Daniel 3 times a day. As for me, I call to God, and the Lord saves me, evening, morning and noon. I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. You know, listen, we have God's attention. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to buy it. We've got it. We have God's undivided attention. We've always had God's undivided attention. The question is, does God have your attention? That's the question I wrestle with. Has he got my attention? And so I look for opportunities so that I can give him attention and so that he's able to minister into my life. And I find that to be a very, very productive process. So that's the first bad report. It's the bad report that comes before you've even set off. It's designed to hem you in, to stop you from moving out and coming into bigger things in God. And the medium is fear. It may come through circumstance or other people even, but it's really the architect behind that is the enemy. And it's the bad report that tries to rob you of all the promise that God has in store for you. The next bad report is the one that comes to you once you've set off. Imagine that you've kind of had to wrestle through all of these precursors to even set off eventually, and you've worked your way through all of that stuff, and you've stepped off of the shore onto the water because Jesus has said, come journey with me, and you find yourself walking on the water and all seems to be going well, and all of a sudden something gets your attention, you're distracted just like Peter, and you take your eyes off the ball, and all of a sudden you get this sinking feeling and the storm's overwhelming and you don't think that you can make it. So you have the faith to set off, but now that you've set off, something comes along and it tries to undermine your confidence. Distraction cause you to fall away. And if I think about that kind of bad report, I can't help but think of the man called Jairus. Jairus and his daughter. We know that Jairus was a synagogue leader, an influential man. I mean, I just stop sometimes. We need to understand the backdrop of the story sometimes. You know, Jairus was a leader of the synagogue. You know, he would have had to get over himself. We know what the synagogue rulers and leaders and teachers and the priests thought of Jesus. And he's Jairus, he's a ruler of the synagogue, and his daughter is dying, and his faith has come to nothing, and he hasn't got the answer, and what he thought he had in the locker, he hasn't got. He's got faith in God, but that's not changing anything. And he decides he has to do something radical. He decides to be bold, to be different. He dares to believe a different report. And so he sets off to find Jesus, and he finds Jesus, and I love it when you read the story, because he finds him, and he doesn't have to garnish favour from Jesus. He doesn't have to ply him with money or alcohol or drugs or with emotional blackmail. He doesn't have to convince him of the worthiness of his case and the worth of his one singular daughter. You know, he doesn't have to do any of that. We just know that he finds Jesus, that he falls before him, and he says, my daughter is dying, will you come with me? And Jesus says, yes. I love that. It really just breaks the back of this notion that we think before God gets involved, we have to twist his arm. We don't have to twist his arm. Sometimes we're trying to twist his arm and we don't even know we're trying to do that. We're trying to work something up with fancy prayers or with long elocution and the multiplicity of our words. Listen, when you pray to God, God's not moved by your volume or the multiplicity of your words or your clever language. God is moved by your faith. It's not in your ability to speak, but it's in God's ability to hear and understand what you're saying. I love the fact that we can just say Tapa. Jackie, I never knew the guy, but Jackie knows all the guys. You know, I would say brought him on a hero of faith in Scotland, and he was at a particular function, and they esteemed the man of God, and they were sitting down for some food, and they asked the man to pray over the food, and he just went, they were waiting for some long, exclusive, very eloquent speech and petition before God, and the man of God who knew God knew enough not to impress anyone. Apparently he just said to the food, Tapa. It's true, isn't it, Jack? Tapa. So Jairus gets to Jesus, and he tells him what's going on, and Jesus agrees to come with him. And then what happens is there's an interruption. The woman with the issue of blood turns up. Imagine that you've had to get over yourself, your thinking, your culture, your peers. You've been brave, you've set out to find him, you've found him, you've fallen on your feet, told him the circumstance, he's brought straight into it, giving you the impression that you can be confident in him and how he wants to deal with the situation you're in, and then you're just about to set off and your daughter's life is on the line, and suddenly someone else turns up and Jesus has to stop. It's so much more than a pregnant pause, isn't it? Read the story, that's what happened. I like to think I would have handled it the way Jairus handled it. But I'm not sure that I would have. I mean, let's really think about it. His daughter is at home and she is presently dying. It's not his imagination. He's not trying to create a drama. There is a drama. But the woman with the issue of blood turns up, and all of a sudden Jesus just parks Jairus there. We don't know that they have a dialogue. It doesn't seem that they do, but he parks Jairus there, and then he ministers to the woman with the issue of blood. I love the fact that God's got time for all of us. And I think Jairus held his peace. I mean, what else can you do? But it would seem there wasn't a conversation. And so he deals with the woman with the issue of blood, which is a beautiful scenario and a beautiful ending in itself. And then he turns to speak to Jairus, but just as he begins to turn to speak to Jairus, Jairus' servants turn up. And they give him a what? Bad report. And the bad report is this: why bother the teacher any longer? Your daughter is dead. That's the mother of all bad reports, isn't it? You know, your worst dreams realised. You know, you're so near but so far away. You've done all of the things that I've already mentioned. You've got there, you've fallen on his knees, you've petitioned him, he's bought into that, he wants to. That's just how God is. He digs us, he loves us, he's for us, he's with us. You know, and then the woman with the issue of blood turns up and he's reconciled to the fact that there's enough God to go around. Maybe we need to remember that there's enough God to go around. You know, he's a big God, he's very creative. We don't have to be carbon copies of one another. We can just be ourselves, by the way. You know, stop trying to be like everyone else. God didn't make you to be like someone else. You know, you're trying not to fit in. God says, stand out, be you. God celebrates you. He doesn't tolerate you, by the way. And then you're just about to set off again. And these two people turn up in your household and they say, why bother to teach you anymore? Your daughter is dead. I love what, in my book, in the NIV, it says this, verse 36. It says, so they've turned up, they've said, why bother the teacher any longer? Your daughter is dead. Jesus has just finished the situation with the woman with the issue of blood. He turns and he hears what the servants say to Jairus. He hears it. He's dealt with this. He's in situ, and now he hears the bad report. And as soon as he hears that bad report, because he's not a contradiction, Jesus winds that bad report back straight away. He knows what he heard. He knows what Jairus heard, and he knows he has to do something there and then, so that Jairus' climate of faith won't be damaged or undermined. We know that straight away, as soon as Jairus hears that bad report, why bother the teacher anymore? We're told that Jesus, ignoring what they said, Jesus told Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. It's easy to believe when you can trace God. It's harder to believe when you don't feel that you can trace God. The question is, will we trust God even when we can't trace him? But I love the fact that as soon as Jesus heard that, he spoke to Jairus immediately. There's that reining it in before it gets up and running, because that's a freight train. You know, we reel things in, and they're easier to deal with. And as soon as he hears that, I like the Amplified Bible. The Amplified Bible puts it like this. Overhearing what they said, he said to Jairus, do not be seized with alarm and have no fear, only keep on believing. Sometimes that's the hardest thing, isn't it? Just to keep on believing. But all of the evidence suggests something different. But I can honestly say, in the 8 years since I came to my senses and came back to God, God has never failed me. God has come through time and time and time and time again. And I've had to go through things with God, not round things, not over, not under. I've had to go through things with God. But as I went through things with God, my faith was increased. I had a foundation to believe God for bigger and better things. You've got no idea how much faith is in you until God puts a demand on it, by the way. The Bible says if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, then you can... Listen, faith is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the bigger it grows. We've all been dealt a measure of faith. What we do with the faith is our responsibility, not God's. But I think it's awesome. What happened? Well, Jesus goes back. They see the mourners. Jesus says, this isn't unto death. They laugh at him. He takes them into the inner sanctum, if you like, into the room, the disciples, the mother, the father, and the daughter. He shuts the door. And then we're told he speaks to the girl, and the girl comes up from her deathbed. But I think it's very interesting and very noteworthy that they closed the door, that they put that doubt and unbelief out, and they kind of, if you like, sealed the area and created a climate of faith. The people who were in there had faith that Jesus would do something, and Jesus did do something. It was a wonderful outcome. So that's the second bad report. And the third bad report, and it's one that always visits me, is this. It's the bad report that comes to you after you've done something. You know, you felt that you heard from God. You responded in faith. You did whatever God told you to do. And then you step back having done that. And yet you see no fruit. Seemingly no change. Especially if we're trusting God for change in our lives, in the lives of our families and loved ones. It's so easy to be fazed by lack of what we think is events. And that's why we need to have patience in God. You know, there's the promise, there's the passage of time, and then there's the fulfillment of the promise. You know, God has said some things to me that I'm only just beginning to walk into, and He said them 2 decades ago. Other stuff He said today, and I've come into it by the end of the day. It's different stuff, but we need to be patient. Someone said patience is the bridge that carries you over to the promise of God. Who does waiting well? I don't know. Who does waiting well? So that bad report that comes to you after you've done what you felt you should do, it tells you that what you did didn't matter, or it wasn't good enough, it wasn't up to scratch. And I want to say that's you this evening, because that seems to be a lot of us. I pray against the spirit of perfectionism. Right? We're scared to try things and do things for a number of reasons, because we think other people can do it better than us, and they may be able to do it better than us. But that's not the point. God never asked them, He asked you. And God would not set you up for failure, but He will stretch your faith. But we have to be willing to face the fear of failing. When you become open to the fear of failing, you become that more confident and probably won't fail. And we have this idea that we have to do things perfectly. We don't have, God never said we had to do them perfectly, He just said we had to try. We don't have to impress one another with our CVs or with our gifts or our talents. Everybody has gifts, talents. You make it for me, I make it for you. But when I think about that, I can't help but think about John the Baptist. There he is. Herod has put him in prison. And John the Baptist, the cousin of Christ, Jesus said, of those born amongst men, no one greater has arisen than John the Baptist. He wasn't just someone he knew, it wasn't just that he had an intimate relationship, it wasn't just that he baptized him. He was his cousin. They were related, they were family. And we know how bold John the Baptist was, don't we? We know he ended up in the prison with Herod because he had the audacity to speak out in terms of rebuking Herod for the wife that he had taken because it was his brother's wife. We know that Herod's wife's daughter danced. That appealed to Herod, and Herod said, ask anything that you want, even up to half a kingdom, and I will give it to you. And Salome, I think her name was, the daughter said, give me the head of John the Baptist. And the next thing, John is beheaded, and it's on a silver platter. John the Baptist, the one who said, I am not even worthy to undo the sand. The one who said, it's not right that I baptize you, you should baptize me. And Jesus said, this is the way it must be for now. The one of whom Jesus said, amongst those born amongst men and women, no one has risen greater than John the Baptist. So that John, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. He's an icon of our faith. He's one of the patriarchs. He's just out there, isn't he? But then you find him in prison. Expectedly, you can't say what you were going to say and not end up in prison. So we know that didn't faze him. He wouldn't have said it, he was worried about it. But he ends up in prison. But while he's in prison, he begins to think about what's going on. And he begins to question everything. When John heard, i.e. the report in prison, what Christ was doing, he sent his disciples to ask him,